National Review is a dying paper. Its circulation's way down. Not very many people read it anymore. I mean, people don't even think about the National Review. So I guess they want to get a little publicity.
It is either exactly what American politics and the Republican Party need at this stage of the POTUS election cycle, or it is the greatest single example of what has driven the GOP apart and will lead to the eventual election of Hillary, Bernie, or anybody who attacks the conservative brand. The National Review, a powerful voice of the Republican establishment, founded in 1955, dropped a true political bomb Thursday night with their cover story against Trump. Hard questions about whether or not the candidate is anything close to a real conservative. And backing him for president dooms the party to falling in line, quote unquote, behind a huckster. The word so blistering, the Republican National Committee disinvited the publication to the next debate. Just the beginning of the fallout. So let us begin with the former chief assistant U.S. attorney and columnist for the National Review, part of the overall editorial statement. Welcome Andrew McCarthy to the Hard Line, joined by columnist and political analyst who authored one of the essays featured in the same National Review issue. Let's welcome Mona Charen to the Hard Line. I want to thank you both for being here. And Andrew, let me start with you. The simple question is, why now?
Well, I think, Ed, because in your description you said that National Review is part of the Republican establishment. National Review is a beacon of the leadership of the conservative movement, and part of our role is to keep the Republican establishment honest. We've fought this way and fought for this movement for over half a century, and the thought that we would now abandon everything that we've ever stood for in order to hand over the leadership of our movement to somebody who's not a part of the movement, who's actually spent a professional lifetime mainly working against the movement, is just absurd. We're doing what we need to do to stay true to our principles.
Part of what was said in the article, and I want everybody to read this and at least see a little bit of this, Donald Trump is a menace to American conservatism who would take the work of generations and trample it underfoot in behalf of a populism as heedless and crude as the Donald himself. So, Andrew, knowing full well this is how the National Review feels, and what you've said is correct. Many people say, yes, let's make sure it is conservatism. But what does it say to you when Mr. Trump is leading the polls by double digits, when more people in America now want him in charge than anybody who may be a true conservative in your mind?
Look, it seems to me that it's pretty early in the process. This is what the process is about. It's about actually scrutinizing people's records, not what they say they're going to do, but what we can judge that they will do on the basis of what they have done. And I'd say we're still early on. Let's see it play itself out.
But again, let me just get to that one point, though. It is indeed early. But why then are so many people in America then, I would guess in your words, bamboozled by Donald Trump and following him and wanting him no matter what anybody says about him?
You know, look, this is the same country that's elected Barack Obama twice, I think, against the country's interest. So, you know, I think you could probably say for our part, maybe we haven't made our case effectively enough. And the way to make an effective case is to stay true to what your true principles are. And I think that's what we're trying to do here.
All right, let's make the case from another side here. Mona, let me bring you into this. What you said in this, you said as one of the essays here, Trump is no conservative. He's simply playing one of the primaries. Call it unreality TV. What you are saying is what Ted Cruz and others have said out loud. He is not a conservative. He is a phony. He has given to liberals before. He is nothing more than somebody who wants to be a reality star again. This has been said by many people. Don't you feel as if you're just whistling in the wind at this point? Because you say it, other people say it, they say you're right. But again, nobody cares.
Well, let's answer, if I may, a little bit of the question that you asked of Andy.
Please.
Namely, how can you account for his standing in the polls? And at least, and I agree with Andy, you know, the people also elected Barack Obama twice, good point, but there's something else to be said. There have been millions of dollars of negative ads run against Marco Rubio. In fact, the overwhelming majority of negative ads that have been run in the early caucus and primary states have been anti-Rubio ads from, yes, the establishment, if you think of Jeb Bush as being the establishment, among others. There have been zero or practically zero ads, at least in the first part of, since January began, there have been $0 spent on anti-Trump ads. So there's that. There's also the fact that he has gotten about 10 times as much airtime as every other candidate. So when you put those two things together, maybe you're inching toward an explanation for his very high poll standings. And National Review, whether he's popular or not, feels a need and an obligation to observe that he is not a conservative, in case some people are not aware of that fact, and to whom those it is important. And by the way, a fair number of people in polls who say that the most important issue for them is to find the candidate who is the most conservative, a fair number of those choose Trump. And so what the National Review Symposium has done is to point out that this is someone who's been a lifelong Democrat, who's a contributor to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, supports gun control, partial birth abortion, single-payer health care. Those things may not be general knowledge.
Okay, but all what you're saying, if I may interrupt, all you're saying is true. People have put this out in paper before. Why then is, according to the Washington Post, the GOP establishment themselves capitulating to Donald Trump? They are getting behind him. Some have said that he is the best thing available to them right now. What, are they fooled? Are they fools?
Look, Bob Dole is 92 years old. I don't know when the last time was that he convened a meeting of the vast right-wing conspiracy. I don't think anybody's looking to guidance to him. It's been disturbing to me to see some elective office holders like Orrin Hatch make nice noises about how they would prefer Trump to Cruz. I find that disturbing. But I also think that this use of the term establishment has become meaningless. It's a term of abuse at this point. Everyone calls everyone else the establishment. If you look at every single candidate running, you will find that they have either been accused of being the establishment or accused others of being
But let me stop you there for 1 second. You bring up a good point. Andrew, to you then. What about the critics then who will fire back? And they will use that word establishment. They'll say, wait a minute, the National Review, it's a bunch of old white guys and gals. That's all they are. They're completely out of touch. They have no idea what's going on. There needs to be a change in the conservative movement right now. And the people at the National Review just too old to get it. They're too establishment.
Maybe you mean too conservative, I guess. I think anybody who would make a description like that doesn't know a whole lot about National Review. And I guess what I would point out is that in 2007, 2008, we had somebody who had a long, detailed record, the kind of long, detailed record that Mona points out Donald Trump has. This was a fellow with a long, detailed record of very radical, hard left positions, who was masquerading as a candidate, as somebody who was a non-ideological pragmatist, who would listen to everybody and then do the things that worked. And a lot of us were, with our hair on fire, trying to point people to what his record was and explaining that if you look at what he's done, you'll have a better idea of what he will do. Nobody wanted to hear that either, but we've had 8 years of catastrophe. I hope this time around, maybe we're more persuasive about telling people to look at the past to predict the future.
Mona, I only have about 30, 40 seconds left. How distressing is it to you then that we hear people say the people in the Republican Party right now and voters are going to hold their nose? It's Ted Cruz, Donald Trump. They don't like Ted Cruz. They'll do anything to get him out, and they'll even go for Donald Trump.
There are many choices that are still available. I personally support Marco Rubio and think he would be the strongest general election candidate for conservatism and for the Republican Party. I believe, on the contrary, that Donald Trump would either go down to defeat or would so distort the principles of conservatism that we hold dear that the Republican Party would become unrecognizable. It would become a nationalist, nativist, big government, quasi-liberal party, hardly distinguishable from the Democrats, except in which ethnic groups it was pandering to.
It is an exceptional article with a lot of points in it. We're going to have you both back here because this is something that's going to go on, and I know that the National Review and many people there will stand on this and will fight this. Andrew McCarthy, Mona Charen, I want to thank you both for being here. We will talk again. Next up, whomever becomes POTUS, they'll have to deal with government waste on the Hard Line.